My daughter-in-law smiled at me the way people smile at children who don't know any better. It was a Tuesday in March, and she was standing in my kitchen. The kitchen I had designed myself, down to the hand-painted tile backsplash I'd had shipped from a small shop in Santa Fe, holding a manila folder and wearing that particular expression. Patient. Practiced. The kind of smile that has already decided what's going to happen before the conversation begins. "We just want you to be comfortable, Genevieve," she said. That was how it started. Not with a fight. Not with raised voices or slammed doors. It started with the word comfortable, spoken in a tone so soft it could have passed for love. "My name is Genevieve Marsh. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years building a regional property management company. From a single duplex I bought at 34, with money I had saved waitressing nights while my son was in elementary school. By the time I retired, I had a portfolio of 42 residential properties across 3 counties in the greater Nashville area, a paid-off home in Brentwood, on a quiet street lined with oak trees, and a trust my attorney had helped me structure carefully over many years. I also had a son named Fletcher, who was 41, and who I loved more than I have ever been able to explain in words. And I had a daughter-in-law named Sable, who had entered our lives 8 years ago, and who I had genuinely tried, to welcome as my own. I want to be honest about something before I say anything else. Fletcher was not a bad person. I need you to understand that. He was not cruel by nature. He was gentle as a boy, soft-spoken, the kind of child who cried at movies and kept a notebook of birds he'd identified in our backyard. What happened to him, what Sable made of him, slowly and steadily over years, was something I watched the way you watch weather rolling in from a distance. You see it coming. You hope it turns before it reaches you. And then one day, you're standing in the rain, wondering when exactly you stopped believing you could do anything about it. That Tuesday in March, Fletcher was sitting at my kitchen table, with his hands wrapped around a coffee mug, not quite looking at me. Sable did most of the talking. "The property portfolio is a lot to manage," she said, setting the folder on the counter beside the fruit bowl. "Especially at your age. The liability alone, one bad tenant, one slip and fall, and everything you've built could be at risk." "I have a property manager," I said. "I have had one for 6 years. "Right, but you're still the decision maker on everything. That's a lot of cognitive load, Mom." Cognitive load. That was a new phrase. I noticed it the way I used to notice late rent checks, quietly, filing it away. "I'm managing fine," I said. Fletcher cleared his throat. "We've just been talking to some people," he said. "Financial advisors. About structures that might protect you better." "Who did you talk to?" He looked at Sable. "Just some people we know," she said. "People who understand estate planning." I didn't say what I was thinking. I smiled and refilled my coffee, and changed the subject to the weather, and after another 40 minutes, they left. Sable kissed my cheek at the door. Her perfume was something expensive and floral, and it lingered long after her car was gone. That night, I called my attorney. His name was Gerald Hutchins. He had handled my affairs for 19 years, since back when I was buying my 3rd property, and needed someone who actually understood real estate law, rather than someone who could explain it using analogies about boats. Gerald was 72, semi-retired, and he picked up on the second ring because he had always picked up on the second ring. "Tell me exactly what she said," he told me. I told him, word for word, as close as I could remember. When I finished, there was a short silence on his end. "Genevieve," he said, "don't sign anything." "I haven't." "Don't, not until we talk in person." "Can you come in Thursday?" I said yes. And then I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom I had slept in for 22 years, listening to the oak trees move in the wind outside, and thinking about that folder Sable had left sitting on my counter. I had opened it after they left. It was a proposal, 12 pages, professionally formatted, outlining a plan to transfer operational control of my properties into an LLC, jointly managed by Fletcher and Sable, with language about protecting assets and simplifying my tax exposure and reducing my personal liability. It was well written. Whoever had drafted it knew what they were doing. My name appeared in the document 47 times. The word consent appeared twice. The word irrevocable appeared once, buried in page 9. I did not sleep well that night. The conversations that followed came in waves, the way pressure does. First gentle, then more frequent, then with a kind of quiet urgency that made everything feel like it was being managed. Sable began calling twice a week. Fletcher started stopping by unannounced, which he had never done before. Not out of coldness, just because he respected that I liked my mornings to myself. Now he would appear on a Saturday with coffee and pastries from a bakery in Green Hills, and we would sit together. And it was nice. Genuinely nice. And then somewhere toward the end of the visit the conversation would turn. Have you thought more about the restructuring? Have you looked at those documents Gerald would have sent over? We're not trying to take anything, Mom. We just want to protect you. Gerald had not sent anything over. What Gerald had actually said, when I came into his office on that Thursday, was that the document Sable had left was designed to do something very specific. To move control of my assets into a structure where Fletcher and Sable held operating authority, which in practical terms meant they could make decisions about my properties without needing my approval for day-to-day matters. And over time, with the right additional paperwork, that structure could become very difficult to unwind. It's not illegal on its face, Gerald said, setting the pages down on his desk. But it's not protecting you, it's protecting their access to your assets. Fletcher signed off on this, I said. It wasn't a question. Gerald looked at me with the particular patience of someone who has seen many things and has long since stopped being surprised by them. His name is on the proposal as co-author, he said. I drove home in silence. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat in the living room and looked at the framed photograph on the bookshelf. Fletcher at 8 years old, gap-toothed, holding a papier-mâché solar system he'd made for a science fair. He had won second place. He'd cried a little on the way home, and then by dinner he was already making plans for the following year. I had raised him to keep going. I just hadn't anticipated what direction he would eventually go in. The next phase began in April. Sable mentioned, offhandedly, during a Sunday dinner at their house in Franklin, that she and Fletcher had been to look at a senior living community in Brentwood. Not a nursing home, she was careful to say. A community. Maintenance-free. Amenities. A pool. Activities. We're not suggesting anything, she said, passing the salad. We just thought you might want to see it. A lot of people love it there. I have a home, I said. Of course you do, she said. We just thought it might be nice to have options. Fletcher was cutting his chicken. He did not look up. 2 weeks later, their daughter Paige, who was 7 and whom I adored completely and without complication, mentioned at my kitchen table while we were doing a puzzle together that Grandma's house might be too big. Who told you that? I asked. She shrugged with the easy unconcern of a child repeating something overheard. Daddy. I kept working on the puzzle. I found a piece that fit. I placed it carefully. What else did Daddy say? I asked very gently. That you might move somewhere with a pool. I smiled at Paige. I told her I loved her. I made her a grilled cheese sandwich and drove her home that afternoon. And when Sable opened the door, I handed her daughter over with a smile that I had learned to make look exactly like the real thing. That evening I called Gerald again. By May I had done several things quietly and without announcing them to anyone. I had met with Gerald and a second attorney, a woman named Constance Adler who specialized in elder law, and who Gerald had referred me to with genuine warmth. Constance was brisk and precise, and looked at documents the way a mechanic looks at an engine, not with drama, but with the practiced eye of someone who knows exactly where the problems hide. Together, we reviewed my existing trust and made adjustments. We confirmed the beneficiary designations on my accounts. We drafted an updated durable power of attorney that named Gerald and Constance, not Fletcher, as my designated agents in the event I was ever truly unable to make decisions for myself. We documented everything, every conversation I remembered, every date, every phrase. I had also, on Constance's advice, begun keeping a journal. Not a diary exactly, more of a record. Dates, times, what was said, who was present. If Sable called on a Thursday to mention the senior living community again, I wrote it down. If Fletcher stopped by and the conversation turned, I wrote it down. Plain language. Facts. I had also, finally, told someone what was happening. Her name was Roberta Finch. She had been my closest friend for 26 years. We had met at a Property Owners Association meeting in 1998 and discovered that we had both been raised in Memphis, both had exes we didn't talk about, and both preferred to sit near exits at large events. Roberta was 70 and sharp as a Finnish nail, and she had the particular quality of being someone you could tell things to without them becoming something else. I called her on a Wednesday evening and told her everything. There was a pause when I finished. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "Since March." Another pause, and Fletcher knows what Sable is doing. "I think he's convinced it's the right thing." "Convinced," she repeated. Not a question either. Roberta did not tell me what to do. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. She asked careful questions, and she listened, and at the end she said, "You need to make sure that if something happens, if they push this further, there are people who know what's been going on." I told her Gerald and Constance knew. "Good," she said. "And now I know." What happened in June I did not anticipate, even after everything. Fletcher called me on a Tuesday morning and asked if I would come to dinner that Friday. "Just the two of us," he said. He sounded like himself, like the person he used to be before the proposals and the folder and the senior living pamphlets that had started appearing in my mailbox from a place neither of us had requested. I went. The restaurant was one we had gone to for years, a small Italian place in East Nashville, where the owner knew us by name and always brought bread without being asked. Fletcher was already there when I arrived. He stood up when he saw me. For the first part of the meal we talked about Paige's soccer tournament and a documentary he'd watched and the renovations I was thinking about doing on one of my units in Donaldson. He was funny. He was present. He was my son. And then the bread was cleared and he folded his hands on the table and said, "Mom, Sable and I have been talking to a doctor." I said nothing. It's not that we think anything is wrong. It's just that you've seemed tired lately, more forgetful. And we think it might be worth having an evaluation, just to have a baseline. I looked at my son, at the face I had memorized over 41 years, at the small scar above his left eyebrow from a bicycle accident when he was 9. "Who suggested the evaluation?" I asked. "We both did." "Which doctor?" He named someone I didn't know, a geriatric specialist affiliated with a practice in Brentwood. "I'd like to see my own physician," I said. "Of course," he said, a little too quickly. "Of course you can do that. We just thought having a fresh set of eyes." "I'll see my own doctor," I said. My physician was a woman named Dr. Sandra Kelly, who had been my primary care provider for 11 years, and who knew my health history the way a good neighbor knows your routines. Not intrusively, but accurately. I called her office the following morning. I explained, briefly, that my son had raised concerns about my cognitive health and that I wanted a comprehensive evaluation. Dr. Kelly saw me the following week. She asked me questions. She gave me tests. She asked me to remember words and draw a clock and explain a proverb and count backwards from 100 by sevens. She reviewed my chart. She ordered blood work. When she came back into the examination room, she sat down across from me, rather than standing, which I noticed, because she only sat when she had something to say. "Genevieve," she said, "your cognitive scores are in the top third for women your age. Your blood work is unremarkable. Your blood pressure is slightly elevated, which we should watch, but that's not new." She paused. "Is there something happening at home that's causing you stress?" I told her. "Not everything. Not the documents and the attorneys. But enough." I told her my son and daughter-in-law had expressed concern about my ability to manage my affairs. Dr. Kelly wrote something in her notes. Then she looked up at me. "I'll document today's evaluation in full," she said. "If anyone ever questions your capacity, this record exists." I thanked her. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for a moment before going inside, listening to the engine tick quiet. In August, Sable escalated. She called me on a Thursday afternoon and told me, in a voice full of gentle regret, that she and Fletcher had been consulting with a financial advisor who believed my current trust structure created significant tax exposure. She had a revised document she wanted me to look at. She would send it to Gerald. She sent it to Gerald. Gerald called me 40 minutes later. "This is a different document than the one in March," he said. This one transfers primary trustee authority to Fletcher while you're living. Constance should see it today. Constance saw it that afternoon. She called me in the evening. This is more aggressive than the first one, she said. She did not say it with alarm, the way another person might. She said it the way a navigator says, we've drifted. Adjust course. If you sign this, you would functionally be surrendering control of the trust while retaining nominal ownership. The tax argument is real, but the benefit to them far outweighs any benefit to you. What do I do? I asked. Nothing yet, she said. Let me make some calls. September came. Fletcher and Sable invited me to a family dinner, and at the end of it, while Paige was watching a movie in the other room, Sable laid the revised document on the dining room, slid it toward me with a pen. Gerald's already reviewed it, she said. I know, I said. He has concerns. A flicker crossed her face. What concerns? He'll be reaching out to your attorney, I said. He'd like to discuss the trustee provision. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Sable smiled and picked up the pen and set it back in the cup on the sideboard. Of course, she said. We just want this to be comfortable for everyone. There was that word again. Comfortable. What I had not told them, what I had told no one except Gerald and Constance and Roberta, was what Constance had arranged in September, because Sable had used the word irrevocable in a text message she sent me in late August. Just once, in passing, framing it as protection. And because the pattern of contact, the calls, the visits, the documents, the dinner, the medical suggestion, the senior living pamphlets, had become something Constance believed constituted an attempt to unduly influence a vulnerable adult, which is a specific legal concept in the state of Tennessee that carries specific consequences. Constance had filed a protective notation with the county court. Not a lawsuit. Not yet. A notation. A record that said, this person's affairs are being monitored. Any significant transfer of assets from this individual should be subject to review. It was, Constance explained, like placing a flag on a property record. It didn't stop anything on its own. But it meant that if someone tried to record a deed transfer or file an amendment to a trust, the system would pause. And it meant there was now a court record that this had been happening. October arrived the way October does in Nashville. Suddenly beautiful. The trees along my street going amber and copper overnight. I had always loved October. I planted bulbs along the front walk, the way I had every year for 15 years, and I thought about the fact that I would be here in the spring to see them come up. Fletcher came by on a Saturday with Paige. We raked leaves together in the backyard, the 3 of us, and Paige laughed at something. And Fletcher laughed too, and for an hour it was just us, the way it had been before Sable's folder, and the word comfortable, and the document, with irrevocable, buried on page 9. I watched my son rake leaves, and I loved him. That's the honest truth. I loved him completely, and I was also prepared. In November, Sable made a call that she should not have made. She called my property management company, the company I had retained to handle day-to-day operations across my portfolio, and identified herself as my authorized representative. She asked for a summary of outstanding leases and upcoming renewals. She asked about the timeline on 2 properties I was considering selling. My property manager, a capable woman named Diane Okoye, who had worked with me for 6 years and who I had quietly informed in September about the situation, told Sable that she would need written authorization from me before releasing any information. Sable said she would send it over. Diane called me within the hour. She's claiming she has power of attorney, Diane said. She does not, I said. I know, Diane said. That's why I'm calling. I called Constance. Constance called Sable's attorney. Sable's attorney called Sable. I don't know exactly what was said in that conversation, but by the following morning, Sable had sent me a text that was 10 lines long and full of phrases like we were only trying to help, and it breaks my heart that it's come to, and we hope you'll reconsider. I read it once. I forwarded it to Constance. I did not respond. Fletcher called that evening. He sounded different, quieter, like someone who has just understood something they had been avoiding. Mom, he said. Yes, did Sable. He stopped, started again. Is there something we need to talk about? Yes, I said, but not tonight. Come have dinner with me next week, just you. He came on a Wednesday. I made chicken and rice, which was what I had made on the first day he came home from the hospital as a newborn. Not for any symbolic reason, just because it was what I'd had in the refrigerator that day. 41 years ago, and somehow it had become the meal we ate when things were serious. I told him everything: the documents, the attorneys, the notation filed with the court, the call to Diane. All of it in plain language without anger, the way you tell the truth to someone you love and are not yet ready to give up on. Fletcher sat across from me, and he was quiet for a long time after I finished. She said it was for your protection, he finally said. I know. She said, Gerald was getting too old to have your best interests. Gerald, I said, has protected my interests for 19 years. He is sharp and careful and I trust him completely. No one else gets to make that determination. Another silence. I didn't know about the call to Diane, he said. I know you didn't. He looked at the table, at his hands, at the scar above his eye that I had cleaned and bandaged on a Tuesday afternoon in October 1992, and that had healed into the thin silver line it was now. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, and I believed him. That was the complicated part. I believed him completely, and it still didn't change what had to happen next. I need you to be honest with me about what Sable understands about your finances, I said. We talked for 3 hours that night. What came out of it was not an easy thing, and I won't pretend otherwise. Fletcher and Sable's marriage was their marriage, and I had no intention of dismantling it. But what Fletcher came to understand, over those 3 hours and the weeks that followed, was that his wife had been moving pieces he hadn't known were on the board. Some of what she'd done she had told him about, much of it she had not. He made his own calls. I don't know exactly what he said to her. I know that in December, Sable's attorney sent a letter to Constance, formally withdrawing all prior requests and documents related to my trust. No explanation, no apology, just a withdrawal. Constance called me when it arrived. It's over, she said. I was sitting in my living room when she said it. The afternoon light was coming through the front windows the way it does in December, low and golden, filling everything it touched. Outside, the street was quiet. The oak trees were bare, but they were still there, the same trees that had stood in front of this house since before I bought it, and that would stand there long after everything I was worried about had resolved itself one way or another. I thanked Constance. I thanked Gerald. I sent Roberta a text that just said it's done, and she responded within 30 seconds with a single word. Good. Fletcher and I are still finding our way. It is slow and it is real, and it is nothing like I imagined, which is to say it is more honest than the version I had been sustaining for years. We have dinner every few weeks, just the two of us, at the Italian place in East Nashville, where the owner knows us by name. We talk about Paige, and about the city and sometimes about what happened, a little, at a time, at whatever pace Fletcher can manage. I don't know what will become of his marriage. I don't think he knows yet either. But I know my son, and I know that the person who sat across from me is at my kitchen table eating chicken and rice and listening with his whole self. That person is still in there. In January, I planted a Meyer lemon tree in the backyard. It was an impractical thing to do in Tennessee, and the nursery owner told me so, and I bought it anyway. It sits near the fence in the spot where it gets the most afternoon light, and I wrap it in frostcloth when the weather threatens, and I check on it every morning. It is April now. There are 12 small lemons on it. I stood in the yard this morning and looked at them, these unreasonable yellow things that had no business surviving a Tennessee winter, and had survived it anyway. And I thought about that first Tuesday in March, when Sable stood in my kitchen with her manila folder and her practiced smile, and told me she wanted me to be comfortable. I am comfortable. I am comfortable in my own home, on my own terms, with my name on my own trust, and my attorney's number in my phone, and Roberta who answers on the first ring, and a lemon tree that no one believed in but me. I remained. I always intended to.